Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I was 45 the spring the coffee grinder started sounding like it had a nervous tick. It clicked, just a little, right at the end of the grind, like an old man clearing his throat before he tells you the same story he told you last week. I kept meaning to open it up and clean the burrs, but there were muffins to pull and bacon to lay in a register that did that thing where it froze for exactly 7 seconds every third order, and 7 seconds in a rush feels like a lifetime and a half. Owning a cafe isn't a dream so much as an agreement with chaos. You get to be the guy who smells like vanilla extract at 9 in the morning and fryer oil at 2. You get to keep the keys on a carabiner on your belt and feel important when you rattle them. You learn which regulars will tip in quarters and which will always ask for just a splash more oat milk, like oat milk is free and gravity doesn't apply to cups. You make a life out of all the tiny fixes that stand between a person and their breakfast. We bought the place 8 years ago, when my hair still behaved without negotiation. It was a failing deli then, the kind with a chalkboard menu and a layer of dust on the bottles by the window that looked expensive on purpose. I gutted it with my friend Mike over 2 weeks in August that smelled like glue and shredded drywall. We put in a longer counter, a better hood, and a pastry case I told myself I didn't need and then loved like a golden retriever. We kept the old soda fridge because the hinges sang when you opened it and I liked the song. We repainted, hung up a few black and white prints that make a place look like it knows something about New York even when it doesn't, and we opened with prices that made people from the neighborhood frown before their first sip and nod afterward. My wife, Samantha, Sam to everyone but her mother, has a knack for the part of business that needs a smile and a notebook. She came from retail but took to food service like she'd been practicing in her sleep. She can comp a coffee to the right person without making the next customer jealous. She can look at a line of customers that would make other people apologize and say, "We'll have you out of here in 5, and be right." She remembers names. She knows who cut sugar out, who had a breakup, who lost a dog, who needs a long conversation about a shortbread cookie like it's a philosophy. Her brother, Eddie, is younger by 6 years and older in the ways that make you worry. He bounced around jobs without finding one that stuck: warehouse, tires, a month at my place as a dishwasher in a pinch. He's a good kid disguised as a man who forgets his wallet. 2 summers back, he had a run of bad luck that turned into a run of bad choices, and I found him sweeping the alley behind the shop at 9 a.m. With the kind of focus people get when they need to convince you they can change. I put him on the books for mornings at the cafe, trash and deliveries and a shift watching the line at the back when we're short on hands. Samantha cried the first week because it felt like a rescue, and you only realize you've been holding your breath when you let it go. We used a produce supplier named Greg who came in 3 times a week with greens that actually tasted like something and tomatoes that didn't look like they'd been bred to survive a war. He's one of those guys who puts his name on the side of a truck and also goes out on runs himself because he doesn't trust anyone else to talk to the people who write the checks. He jokes with everybody, throws a crate of avocados onto his shoulder like a story, and always compliments the pastries. "Who made these?" He'll say. "Me," I'd say, and he'd do a little bow that walks the line between generous and too much. I liked him. I liked all the guys who knocked on my back door. The back door is where the real city is. You can tell more about a person by how they act in an alley than at a counter. At the counter, you can perform. At the door, you're just a person trying to get a dolly through a frame that was built for narrower days. The back door smells like coffee grounds and onions and the kind of rain that doesn't wash anything clean. The dumpsters have their own ecosystem. The pigeons are union. Samantha handled orders in the front. I took mornings in the line. We met in the middle, always. Life gets simple when your bank account keeps you humble. Simple, not easy. Our days were sauce and stock and payroll. We had a rhythm that felt like a promise. Suspicion, when it came, didn't come for me first. That belongs in a different kind of story. It came for Eddie. He was taking out the trash one Tuesday when he saw Sam at the back with Greg. He told me later he didn't clock it as anything at first because we all flirt with the version of life we can't afford if we want to feel alive. He kept walking. He set down the bag and turned, and something in the way they stood, he said, made a small knot in his stomach. Too close, too familiar, a hand on an elbow in a place where elbows have work to do. He looked away because he's a gentleman under all the noise. When he looked back, he thought, he saw the kind of smile people don't use in alleys unless they forgot where they are. He didn't say anything to me that day. He went home and called his mother. I can picture it, Margaret, cutting chicken cutlets in her kitchen with the window open and the sound of the neighbor's TV bleeding over, Eddie sitting at the table with his hand in his hair. Margaret loves all three of us like we're her idea of family. She's the kind of woman who keeps extra Tupperware so she can send people home with something even if they said they weren't hungry. She told him not to invent trouble. She told him to watch without being creepy. She told him, as mothers do, to tell the truth when the time comes. Tom, Eddie said to me 2 mornings later as we took the cardboard to the recycling bin, we should put in a camera back here. He said it like a man making a practical suggestion. For safety, he added, looking at the bolts on the door that stick when it rains. He's not wrong. We'd been hit twice in as many years by the kind of break-in that looks like a misguided dare. I said, fine by me, because safety is cheaper than repairs, because insurance companies like to see that you tried. He brought a camera the next day, one of those weatherproof domes that look like something from a spy movie until you realize it's going to spend its life staring at pallets and cigarette butts. He installed it with the kind of focus I want from a surgeon. He ran the cable clean, tied into the back office recorder, and showed me the app on my phone where I could watch the alley live if I ever needed something to be anxious about at 3 a.m. I put the app in a folder and didn't look at it again. He looked. Eddie came in on a Thursday with eyes that had been up all night. He set a thumb drive on my desk like a difficult ingredient. "Don't watch this alone," he said, and then went out front to flip the sign to open like a man clocking into a job he can't leave until the rush is over. I didn't watch it. Not then. I had bread in the oven and an egg delivery at 9 and a barista who called out with a cold that sounded suspiciously like a girlfriend. The day ran like a hose without a nozzle. At noon, Margaret and her husband, Frank, came through the front door. Frank doesn't come often. He's a stay-in-his-lane guy who trusts the world if he can measure it. He nodded at me, stiff, then relaxed like men do when they see their kid in a room that smells like food. "We're here for the tuna," he said. Margaret hugged me in that distracted way that felt like a checklist item and then looked around the room with a purpose I couldn't place. "Where's Sam?" she asked, which told me Eddie had called them and told them something he didn't want to say twice. "She's in the office going over invoices," I said. "Good," Margaret said, which sounded like anything but. In the back, Sam sat with a stack of paper and a pencil in her mouth, hair in a knot that meant she'd been working and not trying to look like she had. She looked up and smiled. The smile didn't reach her eyes, but that's a line I'm only using because I need words. It looked normal. Everything looks normal until it doesn't. Frank closed the door. The office is small. It has a desk I found on Craigslist, a safe bolted to the floor because there's a breed of thief out there with a Dalian ambition, and a corkboard with menus from all the places we like to steal from and give credit to. There's no room for drama in there, so drama takes up more space than it deserves. Margaret put her purse on the filing cabinet and took a breath. "Eddie installed a camera out back," she said to Sam, "the way you tell a kid a weather report with their name in it. For safety." Sam's face did a flicker I didn't have time to translate. "Okay," she said carefully. "And then he checked it," Margaret said, "for safety." Frank set the thumb drive on the desk and tapped it. He didn't sit. Margaret didn't sit. Sam didn't sit. I sat because my legs had turned to the kind of spaghetti we don't serve. "I told him we should tell you first," Margaret said to me. Her voice wore authority like a coat she didn't like but needed. "But he is my son, and you are my son too, and the truth is the truth." She picked up the drive and held it like a communion wafer she wasn't sure she could handle. Sam's lips parted. "What is this?" she asked, but we all knew the question had a dozen answers and only one of them would be in the room. "Let's watch," Frank said, and his voice cracked at the end like it had run into an old memory and stubbed its toe. I plugged the drive into the cheap desktop that we use for payroll on a game of solitaire when a lull is the only thing saving your sanity. The footage opened in a window. The alley. Our door. The dumpsters. The edge of the frame catching the corner where we stack the milk crates and the broken chair we keep meaning to haul away for sentimental reasons I can't defend. The timestamp was yesterday, 3 in the afternoon. Slow time, as we call it, after the lunch rush, before the after-school sugar wave. Greg's truck backed into frame, smooth. The tailgate opened. Greg hopped down with the box on his shoulder. A second later, Sam came into the shot, keys in her hand, phone tucked against her shoulder. She laughed, that small laugh that sounds like an apology even when it's not. She stepped too close. He put the box down. There was a sliver of space between them where air should live. There wasn't. He put a hand at her waist. She didn't move away. The camera doesn't care about your reasons. It watches. It shows. They kissed, quick and certain, like a thing you've done enough times to know where your mouth is supposed to land. No one spoke. The footage lasted 30 seconds that stretched like taffy and then snapped back. I hit stop because I am not a person who wants to be in a room with a thing getting worse. There are rules in my head about preserving people's dignity even when they forgot to bring it with them. Margaret set both palms on the desk. Her wedding ring flashed once. "You didn't just insult him," she said. Her voice was low and even worse than shouting. "You insulted us. You insulted the place that feeds you. You took what he has built in our name and you dragged both into the alley." Frank put a hand on his wife's shoulder without looking away from our daughter because I had loved her so long that the pronouns got lazy. "You're better than this," he said, and I don't know if that sentence is ever true, but I know it hurt to hear. Sam put a hand to her mouth and then took it away because it looked like she was trying to keep words in. "I'm sorry," she said, and I believe her and I don't, because an apology is not a mop. You can mean it and still have to clean. She looked at me then, finally. "Tom," she said, and I braced for the explanation that would not help. Instead, "I don't know how to tell you I was lonely without making it sound like I'm blaming you." She shook her head. "I am not." She looked at the screen, at the frozen alley. "It was stupid," she said. "It was," she reached for a word like a dropped spoon. "It was lazy." Eddie knocked then and opened the door without waiting because we are family and doors are for strangers. He stepped in and stopped like he'd run into glass. Margaret turned her head and said, without turning her body, "I showed him." Eddie nodded, eyes on his sister, then flicked to me with the look I had seen when he was 10 and broke a lamp and cried like the lamp was a person. "I'm sorry," he said. "We're not doing this in the office," I said, surprising myself. My mouth had decided before my brain. I stood. "We're going to talk in the kitchen, because the kitchen is where you do the work you don't want to do and it has knives, which forces everyone to be careful, and also because everyone is here and secrets are heavy." I stepped into the kitchen. The staff looked up in that way they do when the rhythm shifts. Jenny at the grill, hair in a bun that could pass safety inspection. Marco on soups, wooden spoon at the ready like a conductor. Hannah at pastry, dusted in flour like a saint. They sensed a weather system without needing to know the barometric pressure. Eddie followed me, Frank behind him, then Margaret with that tough grace she puts on when a storm needs a person to walk into it with a coat. Sam came last. I didn't make a speech. I held up the fact. "We put in a camera out back for safety," I said. "It caught something we didn't want to catch." I looked at Sam. It would have been easy to turn to the staff and make her small. I turned to her and handed her the room. "I can't tell this for you." She swallowed. She is brave in all the wrong ways sometimes. "I did something that hurts people I love," she said. "With a man I shouldn't have been near. At our back door." She teared up at that, the hour. "I'm sorry," she said to the room, "and I know sorry is cheap." She took a breath. "I won't make excuses here. That's all I have." Margaret stepped forward. "We're going to talk about this like adults," she said to the staff, "and then we're going to get the 4 o'clock rush their coffee and their grilled cheese. We're not going to turn a family's fall into your entertainment. We are not that kind of place." She looked at me, and I shook my head to keep from laughing, because even now she was managing the floor like a mother running a wedding. Jenny, bless her, turned back to the grill and flipped pancakes with a flick of her wrist that said, "We are not making this worse," and the smell of batter hitting heat brought us all back to earth. Hannah slid a tray of scones into the oven, banged it once on the rack like a punctuation mark, and set the timer with a twist that said, "We are going to finish this and feed people." The public part of what happened stayed small by design, our people, our family, the kind of everyone that means 50 pairs of eyes and not 1,000. In a small town, that's still a parade. Word moved like it always does, through the mouths of people who walk their dogs and check their mail and stop to make change of their friends' lives. Most folks are decent. They were kind, the ones who came in the next day and tipped 30% on a coffee and didn't say a word. A few asked me if I was okay, and I said yes because no one wants to be told the truth at 8 in the morning with a muffin in their hand. One woman, Martha, who knows everyone's business and polishes hers until it shines, whispered, "You deserve better," as if better is something you can pull from a display case and pay for with a card. We fired Greg. That sentence felt like peeling a bandage off skin and finding more wound than we planned for. I called him, and he started saying the words men use to push air into empty places. It's complicated. I've got feelings for her. This started because, and I stopped him. You don't get to explain, I said. Not to me. Not on my time. I hung up. I called a new supplier. I told Jenny to throw out the spinach I couldn't trust. It hurt to toss food, but it would have hurt more to feed it to people who come to us to be taken care of. Sam moved in with her parents for a while. Margaret stopped by the cafe with casseroles like kindness in loaf pans and never looked at the corners of the shop like it was evidence. Frank came on Sundays and fixed the hinge on the bathroom stall without making a speech about men these days. Eddie kept showing up at 5 a.m. with coffee and the kind of hangdog look I wanted to tell him to stop wearing, except I understood that carrying sorrow you didn't make is a skill no one teaches you. We went to therapy. It's tempting to make that sentence the hinge of the story. It wasn't. Therapy helped me name the ways I was married to the cafe more than to my wife. It helped Sam own the part of her that needs applause. It helped us decide what to do with the part of us that still wanted to sit on the couch and watch reality shows and mock the contestants and eat Chinese food out of the carton with chopsticks like we were good at the same small thing. What it didn't do was make a clean story. We separated because separation is a word that is easier to say out loud than divorce when your cafe is open 7 days a week and you can't afford to have people reduce your menu to your mistakes. We told our friends. We told our parents. We didn't do Facebook. We kept it small and, somehow, it felt larger for being held. I won't pretend I wasn't angry. I was. I am, some mornings, when the light hits the pastry case and I remember his hand on her waist and a slice of camera angle I can unsee. Anger is energy. The trick is to use it to do the dishes. The community decided. Communities do. Most people chose me because it's easier to choose the person who gets up at 4 to turn the ovens on than the one who made an Aliyah stage. Some chose her because people are complicated and love doesn't break clean. A handful chose no one, which is its own kindness wrapped in a refusal. Samantha's humiliation lived in her skin for a while. That's a hard sentence and it's true. She kept going to work at her parents' hardware store and smiled at people who smiled back too hard and made conversation about doorknobs like it was all that mattered. She learned something about how quickly respect becomes currency and how fast you can lose it when someone else shows the tape. We came up with rules. She stayed away from the cafe for a month. When she came back, she came to the front as a customer. We found a time when the room was quiet. She paid with cash because it felt less like getting caught in a web. We stood on opposite sides of the counter and said hello. We were cautious. We were tired. We were gentle. There's a kindness in letting a person do a human thing in a place where they messed up. Eddie and I found peace first. He apologized a lot at the start, then stopped because I told him to stop. You did the right thing, I said. You did it clumsily because there's no elegant way. He nodded the way men nod when they want forgiveness to be currency and then discover it's more like weather. Unreliable. Necessary. He kept working for me, and the mornings with him became a kind of small liturgy, trash bags tied right, floors mopped in long even strokes, deliveries checked against invoices, the back door checked twice, then checked again, because now we all believed in cameras and permissions and trust in the right balance. We rebuilt our supply chain and, while we were at it, a part of our reputation. I sourced from 2 smaller growers who didn't have slick trucks and did have hands that looked like the ground was something you could win against if you paid attention. It cost me more. People in the neighborhood tasted it and told me with their money that they noticed. The cafe took on a certain stubborn shine, the kind places get when everyone knows there's a story and they don't need you to tell it. Are making, the legal things legal. Paperwork is the opposite of romance and sometimes the only way through. I got a lawyer who talks in plain language and writes emails that feel like a stern English teacher put the law in a corner and made it behave. Sam got someone from a firm her mother trusts because women of a certain age understand the world better than we deserve. We divided things a sad way, the house, one car, the terrible living room lamp we were both too stubborn to let the other win. The cafe is mine. No one argued with the gravity of that. Samantha told me she never wanted to be the person who made me sell it, and I said she wasn't. Sometimes kindness is just a sentence you both agree to believe. The people who worked for me stayed. That sounds small. It isn't. Kitchens are families you pay. When a chef leaves, a kitchen breathes weird for a while and then steadies. When an owner falls apart, everyone checks their paycheck and their pride and decides if they want to mortgage their mourning to someone who might cry between pancakes. I didn't cry on the line. I cried twice, once on the way to the restaurant's supply store, behind the wheel, so hard I had to pull into a lot and let a bus idle next to me like company, once on the phone with my mother when she asked if I was eating and I lied and said yes. The rest of the time I cooked and counted and fixed the grinder that clicked. By fall, the cafe felt like itself again, which is to say it felt like the version of itself that knew how to carry its own weight. People forget that a place has a memory. The walls hold you in your worst and your best. A year before, we'd hung a photo behind the counter of the morning line, faces out of focus, cups in hands, all that polite impatience of a neighborhood waking up. I caught myself staring at it a lot those weeks, using the blur like a meditation. People came and people went and nothing we did in the alley changed the way coffee tastes when you need it. Samantha came by one Saturday morning when the light through the front window made everything glow like we had better fixtures. She stood to the side, out of the line, and when I had a breath she stepped up. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. "Sure," I said, and we slipped into the back hallway where employees stand when the world is too loud. "I'm sorry," she said for the 100th time, and I didn't say I know, because we're not repeating characters in a lazy play. "I'm getting better," she said, which meant a lot of things. "I got a therapist who doesn't let me perform. I stopped calling Eddie every time I want to feel better." She laughed a little and grimaced. "I'm volunteering at the food bank so I can remember I'm not the center of a story." She looked at me. "I'm not asking for us," she said. "I don't know if there is an us that looks like something I could live in without waking up angry at myself. I want this place to do well. I want you to be happy when you're making soup." "I am," I said, and it surprised me with how true it felt. "Not all the time." "Enough." She nodded like she'd been waiting to borrow that sentence. She bought a coffee. She tipped 30%. She didn't look back when she left. We've never put the camera footage on the internet. A couple of people asked in hushed tones, like we were holding a piece of the moon in a jar. "No," I said. "We're not that kind of place. I mean the cafe. I mean my life." I unplugged the monitor in the back office that week for 2 days and did the books by hand with a pencil because I needed to feel something that only gets real when it presses into paper and leaves a shadow. Then I plugged it back in. Safety matters. So does mercy. Sometimes Eddie tests it and texts me a screenshot of the empty alley like a blessing, nothing to see here. Sometimes at night when I'm counting cash and the air conditioner finally stops sounding like a jet engine and the quiet that follows is the kind that makes your shoulders drop, I look up at the monitor and watch a cat walk through the frame, tail high, as if to say, "Remember me." I think about all the moments we don't see. I think about how much of our lives are lived in doorways and alleys and back rooms, and how the front room is where we pretend not to be ourselves, and how both are true. If you came into the cafe tomorrow you'd find the same chalkboard, neater handwriting. You'd find a special for a grilled peach salad because the supplier named Lila called me last week and said, "We've got a run of peaches that will break your heart if you don't put them in something right now." You'd find Eddie behind the counter wearing a shirt Margaret bought him that actually fits. You'd find me at the line, flipping eggs 2 at a time like a happy trick. You might even find Sam, in the corner by the window with a book, nodding to a neighbor and keeping her eyes on her coffee and not on the back door, because we raised it all into the light and then we went back to work. No one gets to narrate how you get your respect back. You earn it. You earn it by showing up and making sure the toast isn't burned and the receipts add up and you have good butter in the case, because bad butter will ruin you faster than gossip. You earn it by telling the truth in small rooms and bigger ones and then going on with the recipe. Some days the grinder still clicks, a little reminder that even the parts built to do one job struggle at the edges. I hear it, I make a note, I take it apart when I have time. I put the burrs back in and test it. If it's better, I close it up and face the line. If not, I call a guy. That's life. That's a cafe. That's a marriage, and what's left when a marriage turns into a story you tell yourself while you crack 12 eggs and remember you are, despite it all, exactly where you're supposed to be at 7 in the morning with your apron on and your city waking up on the other side of your windows. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.